right. My name is McKenna Kelly, and I'm a senior writer for Wired, and I am thrilled to be joined with Senator Scott Wiener. We just mentioned before we got up here, Wiener has been a central figure to so many tech policy issues that I have covered for the last 10 years, and this institution has covered, tracked, and influenced for much longer than that. But today, I want to focus on one of the most impactful legislative battles Wiener has been involved in for the last 3 years or so, and that's passing SB 53, which requires AI companies to disclose catastrophic risks, report safety incidents to the state, and makes California one of the first states in the country to regulate AI. So to get us started, I want to set the stage. For people who aren't so steeped into California politics, can you walk us through the journey from SB 1047 to SB 53? What did you learn from the veto, and how did it reshape your approach?
Great. Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for being here today. So representing San Francisco, no offense to anyone else, but it's the best city on the planet for a lot of reasons. And one of them is just a massive concentration of super smart people in many different fields. And one of those is, of course, in technology, and now especially in artificial intelligence, just brilliant people. And I am surrounded by them. And it's great as an elected official to be surrounded by people in different areas who know a lot more than you do and maybe disagree with each other, and you can participate in that dialogue, and it helps improve policymaking. And so back in 2023, people started coming to me, people who are working at AI labs, startup founders, folks working in large labs, talking about some of the safety issues up to and including catastrophic risk. And I had been following it, but I started to look into it more deeply, and we had a series of dinners and salons and just many conversations. And ultimately that produced Senate Bill 1047. All of the large labs had already been many times committing to engage in safety testing of their frontier models before they would release it. So we put it into a bill saying you have to perform this testing. And if you don't perform the testing and something catastrophic happens, you can be liable, and the Attorney General can basically go after you. And that sparked a massive conversation, shall we say. The governor in his veto message referred to the bill as having created its own weather system. But it was an overdue conversation about how do we both promote innovation and public safety, because they're not mutually exclusive. They get pitted against each other, but they're not mutually exclusive. And we know that in technology policy in general, we've tended to do nothing. It's 2026, and there's no federal data privacy law, for example, no federal net neutrality law. And so it's up to the states to act, and we wanted to try to get ahead of these risks. So the governor vetoed the bill and impaneled a panel of experts, a working group, to make recommendations for next steps. They did that. We took a number of their recommendations and some other items, including whistleblower protections for employees at these labs, and then also a program called CalCompute, a public cloud, to try to democratize and expand access to compute. And that became SB 53. SB 53 took a transparency approach, requiring that labs disclose their safety protocols with redactions for trade secrets. And if they don't have those protocols, then they have to say they don't have them, and people will know. So it was a real journey. And what I learned is that there are a lot of different opinions within the tech world. When SB 1047 was pending, there was a number of polls done by both supporters and opponents of the bill. It showed overwhelming public support, almost 80%, and higher support among tech workers than among the general public. And so we really learned that this is a real issue, and it's great that we were able to get something done.
Yeah, and so you've called SB 1047 more liability focused, and then SB 53 as transparency focused. Why make that shift?
Because the governor vetoed the first one. Obviously, SB 1047, in my view, was a good bill. I wish the governor had signed it, but the governor, he's the governor, he gets to make that decision. He decided to veto it. And so when we came back, we wanted to wait and see what this working group produced. We already had our ideas, and we already introduced a bill, and then we took some additional ideas from the working group, which were very solid recommendations, and that's what we moved forward. But the original bill was also very good.
Yeah. So the bill requires frontier developers to publish safety frameworks and transparency reports like we've discussed, but it doesn't prescribe specific standards. Some critics, who I think might be in this room, suggest that it's kind of asking companies to grade their own homework. How do you see this creating real accountability?
I don't think it's asking companies to grade their own homework. It's a transparency bill, right? We went the liability route. That did not work. The governor did not agree with it. And so we went the transparency route, and the governor signed it. It's not grading their own homework because the public and experts and everyone else gets to grade it and to say, you have really good safety protocols, you have cruddy protocols, and you have no protocols. And the world will know. In addition, the bill requires reporting of critical safety incidents. I'm not going to claim that everything that you could possibly want to do is in this bill, but we tried one approach, the governor vetoed it, and now we tried another approach. There are other good bills that have been passed, like in New York, but this is a really solid approach, and I think it was definitely worthwhile.
Yeah, and so the bill went into effect January 1st. Anthropic and OpenAI have already published some compliance frameworks. From what you've seen so far, is the law working as intended?
It's only been like 39 days, or 40 days now. So it's a little too soon to judge. It's good that companies are starting to comply. I know there's already been some online dialogue about is there compliance or not compliance, and that's good, and we'll see how it rolls out, but it's a little too soon to say definitively.
So the incident reporting mechanism routes through the Office of Emergency Services. I think that's an interesting pick. Why pick OES?
We worked with the governor's office on it, and frankly, that's what the governor wanted. And I think that the rationale was that OES is designed to be a nimble agency, to be able to respond and to route issues to the appropriate, whether it's enforcement or first responders or whatever the case may be. That's what I think that was their thinking. And I thought that among various reasonable choices, it was a reasonable choice.
Yeah, and so you also, at the top of this, discussed Cal Compute. Cal Compute, I think, is an interesting industrial play that's bundled with this safety bill. What's the theory behind pairing public compute infrastructure with safety regulation?
Well, they could have been separate bills, and same with the whistleblower protections. So the whistleblower protections protects employees who report or come forward and say there's a problem relating to catastrophic risk and ensures that they don't get punished for doing that. Anytime you regulate technology, there are some people who will say, oh, you're impeding innovation. And regulation can impede innovation if you go too far. It's always striking the right balance. But regulation, if done correctly, will not impede innovation and actually can foster innovation. If you are improving public confidence in technology, there's going to be more support and it can actually make innovation better. If people don't have confidence, then you can have reactions against technology, which could really squash innovation. We knew that we would get that criticism, and so we wanted to include something in there that was very clearly pro-innovation, especially for smaller players. And we know that compute had been getting more and more expensive, and so we wanted to provide this public cloud so that folks who don't have a lot of resources could participate. We want to make sure that this is not getting, as happens, concentrated only in a few big players.
Could you see that working at the federal level?
See what the...
A little bit more like Cal Compute in the public.
Yeah, that would be great. Listen, I'm a big believer. We know that the federal government has played a huge role in many aspects of economic life. There's somehow this really bogus notion that it's just the private sector did its thing. Government has always been there to foster, including, for example, playing a key role in creating the internet. And so, yeah, I think industrial policy is a good thing, and having smart participation by the government in general is a good thing.
Yeah, and so now I want to move into the political fight to get this bill passed. OpenAI, of course, kind of published an open letter that seemed to try to undermine SB 53 at one point last year by roping in EU rules. Andreessen Horowitz, the big tech companies, have kind of really been in opposition of SB 53. What was it like navigating this opposition and ultimately getting the bill over the line?
There was less opposition the second time than the first time. First time we had quite a coalition in opposition, although there were a number of startups that supported the original version of the bill, SB 1047. With SB 53, there are going to be people and companies that are going to oppose any form of regulation whatsoever. And we saw some of that with SB 53. It was less intense than with SB 1047, but it was still there. And that's okay. It's a democracy and people participate. And as a lawmaker, I welcome folks' perspectives. And even if that means opposing it, I think it's healthy for a democracy when you have people expressing different views. And also, if you have people opposing it, you can be a little more confident that it's actually doing something. Because sometimes if no one is opposing it, there are some bills that no one opposes that do really good things. But if you have industry opposition, you should always listen to what people say, because sometimes industry will raise very valid points around implementation. And I always want any kind of regulatory law bill that we're advancing to be easy to implement. So we always look at every single piece of opposition, especially constructive feedback, because sometimes opposition can raise really good ideas. But the fact that there was still some opposition also, to me, said that the bill actually did something.
Sure. Anthropic, though, towards the end there in SB 53 was supporting the bill while other labs opposed it. What does it tell you when the industry splits like this?
That's a healthy thing with any industry. I had my bill that we were able to get passed to sign the law last year to regulate pharmacy benefit managers, PBMs, the drug middlemen that jack up the cost of drugs. And the health insurance industry, because of some of the interconnections between industries, was opposing the bill, which was not really in their interest, but they did it. And then Blue Shield split away and supported the bill, and that was really powerful. And same here. Anthropic was very collaborative with us for both years. And they, for the original version, SB 1047, Anthropic didn't come out in full support, but wrote a fairly positive letter about the bill. So I think Anthropic seemed very interested in producing a good piece of AI safety legislation, and I'm grateful for their participation and support.
Sure. SB 53 dropped, of course, some of 1047's rules in there, like third-party audits. Do you see these pieces as ideas you'd still like to pursue? Or is it the wrong approach?
Yeah, so the third-party audits were in SB 53 and they were ultimately removed by the Assembly. But it wasn't just SB 53. The audits were removed from a series of bills. And that is an issue that has been percolating around. It's very contentious because on the one hand, audits make a lot of sense. On the other hand, it's unclear. It's not a fully developed market for outside auditing yet. And so I hope that market really develops, because I think auditing can be a really good thing. But the Assembly decided that for various bills that last year wasn't the time to do it. That was not my choice, it was the Assembly's choice.
Are there any other provisions that were in 1047 that you could imagine working its way into other legislation down the line?
The liability approach, someone could try to bring that back for sure, to require safety testing. And we'll have a new governor next year. It's sort of a little bit of a chaotic gubernatorial race we have going, and I do not know who's going to be the next governor, and I do not know what their perspective will be on tech regulation. So I think once there's a new governor, people will make an assessment of where they stand on these issues. And so it is possible, but I can't predict the future. Yeah. I wish I could.
So here in DC, there's been a lot of efforts, especially from the Republicans, to preempt some of these state laws. Where do you think that fight stands? Where are you?
Yeah, I don't know. It was not a good look to try to preempt deepfake revenge porn laws, which is what they were trying to do. I don't think that was the thing they were targeting, but the preemptions they were proposing was so broad, it would have preempted all sorts of public safety measures. And you can support AI strongly and still say there are bad things that AI can do that we should not allow to happen. And so it was so ham-handed, and that's why it was defeated 99-1 in the Senate. And it's shameful that Ted Cruz keeps trying to pursue this on behalf of Donald Trump. It's a little bit like Night of the Living Dead. The zombie keeps coming back. And the reality is that Congress has not passed major tech regulation in 30 years. I'll say it again, 2026, no federal data privacy law. How is that possible that in 2026 there is no federal data privacy law? So we passed one in California in 2018. There's no federal or de minimis federal social media regulation. We have passed some laws in California. There's no federal net neutrality law. That's outrageous. No federal net neutrality law. Under federal law, like AT&T arguably could come in and just block you from accessing websites that aren't paying them enough money. And there's no federal law that explicitly prohibits that. And so we passed that in California too. So the idea that the federal government would say, or that Congress would say, we're not going to do anything about it. Oh, but you're not allowed to do anything about it either. That is absurd. And it's actually outrageous. And it shows that this administration and the current leadership, the Republicans in Congress, do not seem particularly interested in actually protecting the public. They just want to protect the companies that are helping them and supporting them. And I think that is outrageous.
Yeah, talking a little bit about preemption here, but bringing it back to SB 53 specifically. SB 53 includes a federal deference provision. Was that more of an olive branch to the AI companies, or was that kind of some kind of strategic armor to preemption?
When you say deference, what specifically are you referring to?
Kind of a little bit of what OpenAI was trying to do with saying, like, if we meet the EU rules, if we meet maybe a federal rule on AI safety, that meets the California.
It doesn't say that. We rejected that amendment. Of course, we want to always look to the other rules and try to harmonize them to the extent possible. But we rejected the idea of the bill, of the law, like evaporating if the federal government does something. But we, of course, want to look to those rules, and to the extent possible, you want to harmonize.
Sure. Okay, so do you think SB 53 would be a good national standard?
I think it is a good national standard, but I want to be clear, that doesn't mean it would be the only AI safety standard, because it's not like you pass SB 53 and then you can just go home and not do further AI policy. AI is an important, significant, and growing part of daily life, and it's impacting so many aspects of life in some very good, positive ways that'll make life better for people, and also creating risks that we need to deal with. I don't think we should ever say, okay, we did this, we're done. AI is not like a frozen in amber kind of thing. It's constantly evolving, and we're constantly learning new things. So I think it's a good thing to do nationally, but I don't think that is the end or the exclusive approach that should be taken.
So what's next on your agenda when it comes to AI work?
I don't have any AI bills this year, although I have colleagues who have quite a few of them. And there's been a multi-year effort to try to deal with algorithmic discrimination and also just AI models making really big decisions about your life. So that's going to be an ongoing effort. There are obviously conversations and efforts happening around electricity and water usage. And then the big one that no one really seems to have a good answer for is the impact on work and jobs. And I know that labor in California has indicated that that's going to be a top focus. I don't know where that's going to go, because it is a really significant change. Technology has always changed work, going back to everything, printing press, the loom, everything. But it usually happens very slowly over time. Even like the personal computer or the iPhone took years or even decade or more to meaningfully impact work. This is happening so quickly, and it will impact such a broad, not just like one or two job types, but like a massive array of job types. And I am not totally confident that our society is capable of absorbing that change as quickly as it's coming. And that doesn't mean that you shut it all down. That has never really worked well when people have tried to do that with technology, but we need to be nimble in adjusting to it. My concern is that we're seeing so much wealth being generated via AI that we don't want to have a tiny group of people receive unbelievable benefit from AI, and you have a bunch of other people who are eating cat food in the gutter. And I want to make sure that the benefits that society sees from AI are being spread so that society as a whole is benefiting.
Sure. And I guess my last question before we open it up to questions from you all is if you had any advice or like trying to explain what lessons lawmakers or people here in Washington could take from the SB 53 fight and bringing these kind of regulatory frameworks to DC for a federal framework, what kind of advice would you give?
I would say talk to a broad cross-section in the tech world. Sometimes I think there are like a small group of companies that have an outsized voice because they are very large. But first of all, even within those companies, there is diversity of opinion. You talk to the GR people, you might get a different answer than you talk to the scientists. But also making sure that this little tech, or whatever we want to call them, the small players, the startups, are part of the conversation. And I think that's absolutely essential. And sometimes the small players have very different perspectives than the large players do.
Great. So we can open it up to questions now. Let's see, where is our mic? Perfect. Let's go over there in the brown sweater.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator. My question is about the audits that you mentioned earlier, the third-party audits. I'm wondering, with the market not being settled, as you said, what role might policymakers like yourself play in helping to settle that, and what would you like to see that role be?
Yeah. So my great colleague, Assembly Member Rebecca Bauer-Cahan, who from the East Bay, who chairs the Assembly Privacy Committee, this has been an issue that she's been intensively focused on. And she has advanced her own bills, and she has made amendments to other legislators' AI bills to put the audit requirement in. And I don't want to speak for her, but I've heard her speaking before, and she's a friend. We've spoken about it. Her take is that if you have delayed implementation, I think she had delayed implementation to like 2030, that will foster the creation of an ecosystem, so the audits will be available. Industry will then say, we don't know if it will be, and then we may have to do audits, and there's not enough auditors, or they're not good enough. And so I think that there is a balance to be struck in terms of having the right timetables and maybe having a escape clause if it turns out that the ecosystem doesn't form. Because again, it is an important issue, and we also want to make sure that it's a good result both for the public and for industry, which is going to have to actually go through it.
Okay. How about up here?
Hi, Emma with MLex. Quick question. I know there's a ballot initiative taking shape backed by Common Cause and OpenAI for chatbot safety. I was hoping to get your quick initial thoughts on that. You think it's the right route?
Yeah, so they've come to a compromise, and it's still unclear to me if they're going to go the ballot measure route or if they'll try to pass a bill through the legislature. I haven't talked to them recently, so I don't know if they've made that decision. I think it's an important issue. We've seen some of the challenges around kids and chatbots, and we've all seen it and read about it and seen some of the really horrible things, like the kid who committed suicide. And so I'm glad that it's happening, and I hope that it passes.
Great. And I think we can do one more. Let's see.
Hello, Corey Marshall, Senior Director of Public Policy at the Chamber of Progress for the Central and Southern region. It was reassuring to hear you talk about economic parity as, certain folks' wealth starts to balloon as it relates to the rise of artificial intelligence. I do have a question about your thoughts on AI discrimination laws. Do you think we should be updating our current penal codes or writing new laws that will govern AI specifically I worked on the Colorado SB 24205 for over 2 years. As you know, that law passed. Governor Jared Polis didn't veto it. He signed it into law, quoted some of our veto request letter when he signed it. But that's a law that is intending to regulate discrimination, fair housing, credit decisions. But do you think the future is a world where we should be updating our laws that are not moving as fast as technology is in the United States of America?
Either way, you're passing a new law, whether you're taking the existing structure and adapting it so it applies well to AI, or you're creating a separate structure. And I think depending on the issue, you could see one or the other working. One thing I said to some of the opponents of SB 1047 when we took a liability approach is you are already subject to tort laws. So if you have a large language model that is used in a way or deployed in a way that, let's say, burns someone's house down, they may sue you, and you can defend it in court, and we don't know what the courts will do, but you're already subject to tort law. And I think the same is true potentially of criminal law. And we may need to make adjustments probably to some of them to make sure that it's fully covering AI and that it's not doing anything weird, because AI is not the same as a human being. So I'm speaking generally because it's a very broad question, but I think it just depends.
Great. All right, thank you all so much. And I
Thank
just
you.
ask you to thank me. I'm copying the man from earlier, Steve. Oh my gosh. I would like you to help me thank Senator Scott Wiener.
Thank you.